As we mentioned, Hillary Clinton still holds a national lead in the latest Real Clear Politics average, but now that lead is only slightly more than 6 percentage points. This is Clinton's post-convention bounce. Seems to be losing a little bit of steam here, with some new polls indicating a tightening race in key battleground states. Here with all the details and what to look for in the weeks ahead, pollster and Washington Examiner columnist Kristen Solstice Anderson. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So when you look at all these numbers in the aggregate, what do they tell you?
They tell me that Donald Trump has a really tough road ahead of him, and that these debates are going to be critical. We've got just about 70 days left in this campaign. And after we got past the conventions, while Hillary Clinton's convention bounce has faded a little, we've settled into a sort of a new normal that's not a particularly sunny picture for Donald Trump. And as you mentioned before in your initial interview, you know, the really important thing here are these swing states. At the national level, sure, Hillary Clinton is up by 6, but what really matters is how are Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton performing in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in Florida. Florida has been a bright spot in the polling for Donald Trump as of late, with that Mason-Dixon poll showing him only down by 2. Florida has a lot of electoral votes. You got to get Florida if you want to get to the White House, so that's a good sign for him. But what's troubling is if you look at states like North Carolina, which should be just a gimme for Republicans, that's a state where the polling over the last couple of weeks has not told a particularly good story for Donald Trump. So if I was advising his campaign, I would tell him, look, right now he's in Iowa. Yes, it's a swing state, but it's a swing state with very few electoral votes. He's going to Arizona on Wednesday. That's a state where he's up by a little bit in the polls. I would look at his schedule and I would say you need to be in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Florida almost every day between now and November.
Is that really what makes a critical difference as the candidate on the ground, or should it be more about targeting, you know, very negative ads in those states?
Well, I think it's got to be a combination of things, you know, but Donald Trump at this moment has really succeeded not by putting a lot of ads on the air. His success and the way he's rallied people has been by getting media attention, and he's way behind, but he gets media attention. And this is why in the 2012 campaign, if you read what the Obama team did, David Plouffe talks about this a lot, where they went through and they looked at the data of every county where they needed to pick up a couple thousand votes here and there, and they used the candidate's time as an incredibly valuable resource and allocated it with precision. And that's what I think the Trump team needs to do. Figure out those counties where he can pick up those pockets of 1,000 votes here, 2,000 votes here, 10,000 votes there to piece together that majority. Absolutely.
That sounds exhausting. What do you think about the strategy of the past couple days where, you know, he's been out talking about bigger issues, talking about immigration, talking about race? You know, some say from a polling point of view, he's not really going to pick up minority votes anyway, so it's a waste of time. Others say it's about messaging and it's about making independents and moderate Republicans feel better about him.
My suspicion.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my suspicion is that it's the latter. You know, Kellyanne Conway, who's been brought in to be the campaign manager for Trump, she's incredibly bright, and she knows that the path to the White House runs through, say, the suburbs around Philadelphia, white, college-educated women who are living in places like Montgomery and Bucks County. And they're the kinds of folks who may be looking at Donald Trump and saying, I like him on the economy, but I'm uncomfortable with the way I think he treats other people. I don't know if I think he's a very nice guy. And so this is, I think, him attempting in these last 70 or so days to send signals, hey, I'm not the big bad guy that the media has made me out to be. But again, it may be too little too late.
Yeah, so you would say instead of doing that, focus on these little tiny communities and going there in person and trying to swing those particular votes. That's the way to go?
Well, I think by going to these markets, what's really important is not just the people who show up at your rally, but it's that you then kind of saturate local media news coverage. You wind up on the front page of that paper with a message that's specific to that community. That's why the candidate's time is such a valuable resource and why it needs to be managed so effectively.
Yeah, I heard Kellyanne Conway talking about that on Friday for sure. Beyond that, I mean, what would be your advice, turning back to the email story? I mean, at this point, highlighting the negativity of the other candidate and keeping it focused on that, do you feel like the story about credibility, whether it's the foundation, the email, any of that, is getting through, or does it make Republicans look bad that they keep, you know, harping on the same thing?
I think the best angle to take on that story is the angle that Hillary Clinton gets to play by a different set of rules, that there are elites and there are average Americans, and the Clintons have been treated by a different set of rules, and they pay more attention to elites rather than average Americans. That sort of flips the traditional narrative on its head. For the last couple of elections, it's been Republicans who have been accused of being the party of the elites, the party of the wealthy. I think if Donald Trump is able to effectively turn that narrative on its head and say, no, it's the Clintons who favor the elite. It's the Clintons who have been getting the sort of special 1%er treatment. I think that does tap into a vulnerability where Democrats aren't used to having to defend against that.
A lot of people have noted that it seems like his tone, at least on immigration, has changed. He's tried to come out and say, no, I'm not for amnesty. And another time he says, well, maybe we can work with people. I feel like anything that's coming out of his mouth at this point has probably been focused group to death. Is that a fair assumption? And do you think that this is intentional then?
Well, I bet you Donald Trump would push back against the notion that he's doing any focus groups. He always says that people like me who do polling, he doesn't listen to people like us. But it does seem like he may be getting that advice from someone like a Kellyanne Conway, who has seen that even within the Republican Party, there's a pretty sizable portion that says, look, maybe we at least should have some kind of a path to legal status. And so Donald Trump was able to win large portions of Republican voters in the primary who said, I support a path to legal status. It's not the only issue that matters for his campaign, but I think he now understands, look, we're in a general election. If I stay on my primary message, I'm going to be stuck at 35% of the vote. That's not nearly enough to get to the White House. I've got to go a little broader.
Kristen Soltis-Anderson, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
The best of street justice is still ahead tonight. I can't wait. Plus, we'll get into all of this with our political panel. Will things get even tighter in this race? We're going to talk about that in just a moment as justice rolls on.